You didn't choose to be born, and you won't choose when you die. Everything in between, it's rented, borrowed, temporary, fragile as breath. Your job can vanish with a phone call. Your health, one blood test away from collapsing. Your partner can walk away tomorrow. Your parents will die. Your friends will move on. Your body will betray you. And one day, you will lie down and never get up again. You don't own anything, except this, the guarantee that you will die. That's not negative. That's not pessimism. That's reality. And it's the only real foundation you've got. Most people spend their lives dodging this truth like it's some kind of poison. They scroll, drink, work, pretend, just to stay numb. But if you stop running, if you stare into the void and don't look away, something changes, not in the world, but in you. And that's where Karl Jaspers comes in. Jaspers didn't offer comfort. He offered clarity. He called death a Gren situation, a limit situation, a moment where everything falls away. You realize you're not a role, not a job title, not a dream. You're a finite being walking toward a certain end. And that awareness, it's not despair, it's freedom. It is only when we confront the inescapable, Jaspers wrote, that we become truly aware of our existence. This video is not about accepting death, it's about using it. Because once you understand that death is the only thing that cannot be taken from you, every second of life becomes a decision. Every breath becomes deliberate. And all the illusions, success, status, immortality, burn away. Death is not the opposite of life. It's what gives life weight. And if you're brave enough to walk with it, you might finally stop sleepwalking through your days. Let's begin. You can go through life without ever waking up. Wake up, shower, eat, work, scroll, sleep, repeat. Repeat until the pattern itself becomes your identity. And then, one phone call, a diagnosis, a crash, a moment. Suddenly, the pattern breaks. And with it, so do you. What Jaspers called a limit situation isn't poetic. It's brutal. It's the moment life stops pretending. Death steps into the room, not as a metaphor, but as a fact. And you are no longer who you thought you were. You're no longer in control. You're exposed, naked before the truth. Limit situations are those in which we are brought up against the final boundary of our being, Jaspers writes. They cannot be avoided. They cannot be solved. They can only be lived through. In that moment, something irreversible happens. The world doesn't change, but your relation to it does. All the things you thought mattered, your goals, your timeline, your 5-year plan, collapse like cheap scaffolding. And what's left is what always was there, you, the real you, the one who pretended not to know they were dying all along. Death, in Jaspers' view, is not just an endpoint, it's a defining frame. We cannot evade death. It is the most personal possibility of existence. Let that sink in. Every other experience you share with others, joy, pain, success, failure, but your death is yours alone. No one can do it for you. No one can fully understand it with you. That solitude is terrifying, but it's also clarifying. Because in confronting death, we are forced into truth. You're not free because you can choose between brands or career paths. You're free only when you know you are temporary and choose to live anyway. There are people walking around today who've been told they have 3 months to live. Some of them are more alive than they've ever been. Not because they found meaning, but because the illusion of permanence was shattered. They're not chasing a fantasy anymore. They're here, now. Every word matters. Every choice matters. Every second matters. That's the paradox Jaspers exposed. Death limits us, but it is this very limit that makes existence authentic. Think about that. Without death, nothing would matter. Without death, There would be no urgency, no consequence, no depth. Death is the cost of consciousness, but it's also the key to real freedom. Not the kind you perform for others, but the kind that can't be shaken because it's built on what can't be denied. So no, death isn't the enemy. The real enemy is numbness, and the only cure is confrontation. They buried their son in a closed casket because the impact shattered his face. He was 19. He died on a Tuesday. By Thursday, his room was still warm with the scent of his clothes. There is no language for that kind of silence. No therapy, no religion, no breath deep enough to hold it. The world moves forward. But for those who stay behind, time becomes a ghost. And here's the brutal truth. It's not just the person who dies. It's the version of you that existed with them. A part of you is buried too. A part that doesn't regenerate. Jaspers understood this. He saw death not only as something we face ourselves, but as a rupture that tears through our experience of others. The death of another shakes the foundation of our world. It reminds us that what is most real can vanish without explanation. You don't recover from that. You reconstruct yourself around the whole, and that's where the lie collapses. The lie that life has structure, fairness, logic. There are parents who walk into their child's bedroom every day for years just to sit in the doorway. Not to move on, but to remember that they existed. The silence becomes sacred. The grief becomes ritual. Because no theory of life can explain what it feels like to bury your reason for living. This is not weakness. This is the confrontation Jaspers calls existentielle Erschütterung, existential shattering. A break so deep it forces you to see. Nothing is promised, nothing is protected. Psychologically, this is known. Freud described mourning as the work of the psyche to detach libido from what is lost. Kübler-Ross gave it 5 stages. Bowlby studied its developmental roots. But what none of them could fully explain, what only death itself makes clear, is that loss doesn't visit you. It becomes you. And in that, the mirror turns. Because when someone you love dies, it's not just their absence you feel. It's the preview of your own. Their death is a rehearsal for yours. A message, quiet and cruel. You too will vanish. You too will be a name on someone else's lips. You too will become silence. That's the second truth death reveals. The first is that you will die. The second is that everyone you love will too. And this knowledge, far from being morbid, is the start of meaning. Because once you accept that loss is not an accident, not a glitch in the system, but the core structure of existence, you can finally stop expecting life to make sense in a way it never will. And you begin to see grief not as a breakdown, but as a testimony. Proof that you were connected, that you were capable of love, that you were awake, even if it hurts. We are never more aware of our freedom, Jaspers wrote, than when we stand face to face with death. Grief, then, is not weakness. It's the weight of having lived. And when you carry that weight with open eyes, you stop running from death and start walking with it. No one talks about the day you realize you've built your life on lies. Not dramatic lies, just slow ones. A career that means nothing to you. A relationship you're too tired to leave. A version of yourself that was never real, only rewarded. And then, one morning, you wake up, and there's no more story to tell, only the weight of pretending. That is a kind of death. And in many ways, it's worse than the real one, because you have to keep living through it. You see, people fear death. But what they fear even more is change that exposes them, the collapse of their image, the dismantling of their identity, the raw confrontation with a terrifying possibility. What if the person I've become is not who I truly am? Karl Jaspers saw this moment not as failure, but as initiation. He believed that true existence only begins after the self has been shattered. Not once, not symbolically, but deeply, when the scaffolding of falsehood finally breaks. Existence is only possible through the shipwreck of all securities, he wrote. Not through success, not through validation, but through shipwreck. The drowning of who you were, the silence that follows when no one is watching, and even you stop performing. There are men walking into offices every day who once wanted to be musicians. There are women raising children in homes they never chose. There are people with six-figure salaries and suicidal thoughts. This is not a glitch in the system. This is the system. You build a life to survive and end up imprisoned by the very thing that kept you alive. Philosophically, this is a form of inauthentic existence. You're not lying in a malicious way. You're lying in the necessary way, because to live honestly would require the courage to lose everything. And most people aren't ready to do that, because symbolic death is brutal. There's no funeral, no sympathy, no closure, only emptiness, and the slow work of starting again. But this is where Jaspers differs from softer philosophers. He doesn't try to soothe this collapse. He demands it. He sees the annihilation of false identity as the gateway to freedom that is earned, not given. To become oneself is not a comfort, it is an ordeal. And here lies the brutal logic. If you do not die to who you were, you will never live as who you are. You will wear a mask so long it becomes skin. You will perform so convincingly you forget it's an act. And one day, you'll die never having lived. The solution is not comfort. It's confrontation. It's walking directly into the fire of loss, not just of people, but of self, of illusions, of dreams you never really believed in, of names you gave yourself just to be loved. And what rises after that is not a better version of you. It's you without the layers, without the fear, without the lies. Death doesn't always come with a heartbeat stopping. Sometimes it comes with a truth you can't unsee. And once that truth speaks, you either let the old self rot or spend the rest of your life dragging its corpse. They keep your heart beating. They replace your joints, extend your breath, simulate your neurons. They scan your DNA, edit your embryos, promise to upload your consciousness to a machine. And you believe them. Because believing feels safer than admitting the game ends. We've never had more knowledge, more technology, more mastery over the human body, and we've never been more terrified of dying. This is not progress. It's desperation dressed as innovation. Karl Jaspers saw this coming. He warned that when reason becomes technocratic, when it forgets its existential roots, it turns into illusion. The attempt to overcome death through science is not a solution. It is a flight from the truth of existence. Science can delay death, yes. It can explain mechanisms, predict patterns, cure diseases. But what it cannot do, what it will never do, is eliminate the reality that you are finite, bounded, mortal. You will die, and that fact is not a bug to fix. It is the very structure of being. To deny death is to deny yourself. This is where transhumanism, Silicon Valley immortality projects, cryonics, and AI consciousness fail. Not technically, but philosophically. They try to extend the mask instead of facing what's beneath it. They offer comfort, not truth. But truth does not care if you're comfortable. We now live in a culture addicted to longevity and allergic to finitude. We sell anti-aging creams like armor. We inject youth into our faces, not because we want to look better, but because we're terrified of looking dead. Every advertisement whispers the same lie. You can stay. You don't have to go. But underneath all this technological bravado is a species that has not emotionally matured beyond childhood. We are still bargaining with the dark, still trying to outsmart the one fact we cannot rewrite. Jaspers would call this spiritual blindness, because real existence is not found in control, but in surrender to what is unchangeable. It is in the face of what we cannot change that we are called to authenticity. Let that sentence sink in. Because here's the paradox. The more you try to escape death, the less human you become. Because what makes you human is not your capacity to extend time. It's your capacity to live knowing it will run out. The ancient Greeks understood this. Medieval Christians understood this. Even terminal patients understand this. But now, in the age of simulated life, we act like gods while dying like children. The truth is, no upload, no surgery, no miracle compound will give you back what death demands. Everything. You can stretch time, but you cannot stretch meaning. Because meaning only exists in relation to the end. A story without an ending isn't eternal. It's incoherent. And so the real courage is not found in erasing death, but in staring at it with both eyes open and choosing still to live. They don't warn you that the last words you say to someone might be exactly that, the last. There's no music playing, no premonition. You argue about groceries, you kiss without thinking, you say, "See you later." And then they disappear from the world. Everything else you own, your money, your work, your name, can be touched, stolen, erased. But not this. Death doesn't need permission. It is the only thing that will never leave you. And when everything collapses, when the world strips you bare, when the titles, the mirrors, the rituals fall away, death remains. Death is not an event in life, Wittgenstein once wrote. We do not live to experience death. But Jaspers pushes further. We are not subjects observing death. We are shaped by it, defined through it, transformed within it. In other words, you don't just encounter death. You are built in its shadow. You are born into the deal. You will live knowing the terms. And that knowledge, if you don't reject it, if you don't drown it in noise, gives you something almost no one has. Clarity. Not comfort, not control. Clarity. The kind that silences the ego. The kind that makes fame look absurd, ambition look comical, and regret feel like theft. You're not too early, you're not too late. You are exactly where you were always going to be, here, alive and dying. So what do you do with that? You stop treating life like a rehearsal. You stop trading your days for validation. You stop asking for permission to feel. Because when death is no longer a stranger, life is no longer a game. Consciousness of death leads not to nihilism, Jaspers writes, but to the deepest form of responsibility. Not for others, for yourself. Because once you realize you owe nothing to the systems that numbed you, once you stop trying to outlive the end, you're left with the only thing you ever truly possessed. This body, this breath, this moment. And then, silence. Not fear, not grief, just presence. The kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that doesn't ask for more time, the kind that knows the end is not something to escape, but something to carry. Because when death is your only possession, life becomes your only act of courage. If you've made it this far, it means something in you is awake. You're not here for entertainment. You're here because the noise of the world isn't enough anymore. Because some part of you knows life is short, fragile, unpromised, and you're looking for truth, not distraction. This channel was born out of that same hunger, to question what matters, to face the uncomfortable, to speak what others are afraid to say. But the truth is, that kind of content doesn't survive on its own. We don't have sponsors, marketing teams, or viral gimmicks. We have you. That's it. And without your support, this work can die. Quietly, silently. Like so many voices that tried to speak honestly and disappeared. So if these videos mean something to you, If they've made you think harder, feel deeper, live more fully, consider becoming a channel member. It's more than support, it's a statement, a way of saying, this matters. Keep going. As a member, you get early access, behind-the-scenes posts, direct input on future content, and a community of minds that don't settle for surface-level living. And if you want to make a one-time contribution, the Super Thanks button is there. It helps more than you can imagine. But let me be clear, just by watching, just by being here, just by sharing these videos with people who need them, you are already helping. And I thank you for that. Truly. Still. If even a small part of you wants to give something back, now is the time. Because voices like this only stay alive if someone chooses to keep them alive. And maybe, just maybe, that someone is you.